Hey guys, welcome to Missionary Moments. I'm John Chockle, happy to be sitting down with Mr. Franklin Roberts. You may recognize his remarkably good-looking person from a prior episode. And that's when we sat down with, who was it, Franklin? It was you,
Cole, Nick, and
me.
Yes.
And me. Yeah, well, we sat down and we just talked about your journey to the Catholic faith, to the Catholic Church, and a little bit of the process. I think today we'll be able to, for at least your personal story, be able to get into that maybe a little bit more as you're just kind of introducing yourself. But then also, everybody, I hope that this is a helpful little introduction to some thoughts and observations on just the signs of the times, on where culture is relative to Christianity, just the powers that be, I suppose, in the culture and remnants of truth that we might see there. I think we'll also chat a little bit, Franklin, about just like where young people are today in terms of a society. I don't want to I don't want to be too vague with all this. So I think some helpful, practical, real life examples will be helpful. But just where society, where we are, where our families and friends are, in terms of a real crisis of faith and truth and solidity and social roots that have always undergirded every single culture ever that I'm aware of, and how
the cultures that last have those roots.
Has those roots, right? So, but anyway, I guess maybe you could start by just sharing a little bit about yourself. I know that you're forklift mega certified at Menards. Yeah. Who's Franklin Roberts?
Well, in addition to being forklift certified, I'm also an author of a fantasy series. It's kind of really my main artistic passion. Then I, for a while, taught karate for the longest time.
Yeah.
I'm third degree black belt in American freestyle karate. And that's just a combination of a bunch of different martial arts. So no matter where I go, I'm at the very least an experienced white belt with that. Yeah. And I got to work with a lot of people teaching at karate. I realized that most of teaching is actually encouragement. And then every once in a while you give them a little, use a little bit of my technical experience to correct things. But that's all there is to that. I went to school for radio, TV, film at UW Oshkosh. I did a few things there, but my main strength was really script writing, and that evolved into book writing, and now I'm an independent author now, working on my fourth book.
Look at you.
Yeah.
At 22 years old, man.
That's when I published the first one.
Yeah, I'm giving you a hard time. How old are you now? Are you
25.
25, wow. And what's the name of the series that you finished?
The Wizard Slayer Saga. It's dark fantasy, think Conan the Barbarian type stuff. Yeah. But what really got me into that was, one, I like cool fantasy stories, but I was also getting sick of meaningless stories. And I wanted to have a story that wasn't just propaganda about meaning. It just has it embedded in the story itself. Because even a casual reader could pick it up, think it's nothing but a cool action adventure story, put it down and think it's cool. But
that's an interesting parallel. Can I just ask you about that? So whether it's in books or maybe in movies, anytime where we'd encounter a narrative, you kind of paralleled there, or juxtaposed rather, what'd you say, propagandized meaning and embedded meaning or truth? What's kind of the difference in narrative? Like if I'm sitting down to watch a movie today or read a book today, how would I know the difference between meaning or truth that's propaganda or that's fundamental?
Propaganda doesn't feel right. It doesn't resonate as deeply with you, and it's too explicit in what it's saying. I never explicitly state the theme of my books, but it's there if you just pay attention to it. When I write, I actually try to keep it as subconscious as possible. I'm having fun when I'm writing. I'm kind of playing. I just think of what's cool, make it work, and then in the editing process, I'll go back and go, oh, that's what I was getting at there. And it's cool because I'm doing all this stuff that I don't quite realize, but I'm going at these deep truths that's in every good story.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know what you mean, though. Not so long ago, I watched this movie, and it wasn't particularly good or bad. What was it? I watched it with my wife. Let's see. Emily Blunt just came out. It's called The Fall Guy. Emily Blunt was just in The Fall Guy. This movie came out, well, I guess maybe a year ago now. But it was free on Prime as of like 2 months ago. Anyway, so we sit down, we watch this movie. And it's pretty good. You know, it's action, comedy, things like that, which I enjoy. But it didn't have like a deeper, significant, like a symbol of truth necessarily. Like there's people fighting, there's plenty of drama, and there's sort of like
You didn't find the protagonist compelling.
Right. Maybe not particularly compelling, but even if I did, like what they were fighting for was wasn't of like particular significance to me. It was interesting enough, I suppose, for them in terms of the script that was given and whatever. But I don't know. I feel like I see that a lot in movies now, where it's where the battles are fought on platforms that are not universal. So there's entertainment in it, but it's not entertainment that has significance in my own life. So it doesn't go beyond me sitting down for the 2 hours to watch the movie or read the book. It just sort of... Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very well said. I mean, to a certain extent, you're never going to totally have the same motivations as the character on screen. I myself have never wanted to throw a ring into a volcano. But whenever I'm watching Lord of the Rings, I can see myself in Frodo and all the characters, really.
Yeah.
But no, I get what you're saying. I think some people are attracted to the spiciness of drama or intrigue, or maybe they really like the just the payoffs of twists in a narrative, but they're not pulled forward by that deeper calling to adventure, even if it's not an adventure story. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does. One thing that we're going to chat about a little bit today, and maybe that's a pretty good segue into it, is I think the shocking lack of adventure being pursued by young people who live profoundly boring, unadventurous, virtual lives. And this is expressed in different ways through the entertainment industry, maybe even through sports. I'm a big sports guy, but like that's not... Like, sports is one of those things that we could talk about that has real value. But like if we like step back in terms of the conversation, what we really want to tackle is like what is of like real and significant value to every person that sometimes like they may or may not be aware of. What does the culture, I suppose, offer? How maybe have we experienced this in our own lives? And like, you know, how do we respond to just a crisis of young people who are more medicated than ever before? Whether it's through the medication of something that's prescribed by doctors, or just the medication of doom scrolling, the medication of their own phone, to various addictions, to drugs, pornography, things like that.
All those things are related to the crisis of meaning. I think it's all tied up in the same thing. Because meaning is what gets you to want to shoulder the burdens of responsibility. I can't remember who said this, but with any why, there's a how. So if I have a reason to go out and have an adventure, then I'm willing to bear any difficulty in that adventure. And part of the problem with young people is that there's a certain overprotectiveness in our society that really gets them to not take those first adventurous steps, that really holds them back. And I think that might be tied up in everything. Because just think about how kids are raised now. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you know, you kind of just let your kids run outside, have fun, and like be back by dinner. And now it's you track your kids using their phones. I mean, people freak out about the government tracking your kids, but you have that same overprotectiveness in your own house. Now, granted, they're your kids, so fair enough. there's a point there, but part of growing up isn't just, remaining unhurt. You have to get hurt when you're growing up in order to be able to show that
it feels like so
hurts.
plastic, right? It's like,
Yes.
it's like people are like bubble wrapped.
hmm
Like, oh, it's okay. And I think but people overextending themselves almost to just like, to people, young people, and just affirming who they are and what they want. And not that that's not valuable. But like, to get back to the meaning thing, crisis of meaning, why do you think there's a crisis of meaning in modern culture? If you just look at millennials, Gen X, Gen X, is that the one that's younger than us, or Gen Z?
I'm the oldest of the Zoomers.
Okay.
I think Gen X is the one before me,
Okay.
and then there's Gen Alpha
Okay.
coming along with their iPads and
Hard to keep up.
yeah. I don't know.
Anyway,
I like
everybody,
some of
let's
them,
just say
though.
below the age of 30 to 35,
Sure.
roughly. Crisis of meaning.
Well, I think a lot of it is they don't have a reason to go out into adventure. They've been raised under the assumption that if you're safe and well-fed and entertained, that's what life is about. And for the vast majority of human existence, if you somehow managed to be well-fed and entertained and have a happy family that's able to get together safely, that was pretty good. You had to really, get into the deep of things in order to bring that sort of state of being. And now, unfortunately, we take it for granted. And only because of that now, since we don't have that kind of trial by fire of life, we have this hollow existence, if that makes sense.
What's hollow about it? Like if I pull like a random 25-year-old in here and say, hey, do you have meaning in your life? Maybe they're not particularly religious. On average, they wouldn't be. How do you think they would respond to that?
Probably respond with maybe certain people in their life. If they have a certain career passion, they might say that, or some sort of artistic thing. Might give you some vague spiritual answer. I think those are imperfect answers, obviously, because all the things I mentioned, for the most part, are things through which you can get meaning, but not the whole of meaning, right? So careers, for example. A career happens to be a great way to make money. You kind of need money to live. So there's a certain level of meaning to be made in that, even if you absolutely despise your job. You're still getting something proper from it. But to make the career your entire life, a lot of people are suffering from that now. They're going through, there's kindergarten through high school, and then college for 4 to 8 years sometimes, just to get into a career. And since they've sacrificed family and fun all that time, they realize, this isn't the total meaning I was looking for. I only have money now. Well, whatever, it's they weren't able to integrate the other things that people find meaning in along the way.
This reminds me of Aristotle when he talks about different meanings or significances that sometimes, and he would say that they become idols of sorts and ultimately lead to unhappiness. But it's the pursuit of money, it's the pursuit of honor, social status, it's the pursuit of power and influence, authority, and it's the pursuit of pleasure, our own sort of, ease of life and comfort. I think it's interesting because I don't know, if you just like rifle through those, right? Pursuit of money, pursuit of power and influence, pursuit of honor and prestige, and pursuit of pleasure. Which one of those four is winning today? It seems like all four are finishing in first place. But classically, in virtue, it would be in sort of a virtue-based ethics. It's like none of those are bad; those are all fine.
They're just not integrated in the highest good.
Yeah, right. So if people pursue it as the end good, they're ultimately unhappy and maybe feeling hollow and alone, isolated, disconnected socially now, and
definitely.
Right. So what if you look at? Do you think how come do you think young people are finding this out? Like if we just maybe have in mind our own networks, if you will, friend groups,
Mm-hmm.
to what degree do you think there's awareness of these, like the place that these four things of power, honor, pleasure, what was the other one? Money,
Yeah.
have? And do people are people able to recognize that it's like a well-known philosophical reality that these things in the end are instrumental goods and not final goods, and if you predicate your life on them, you're going to be unhappy? Where do you think, culture broadly is at with this? We can kind of speak to the Midwest, but like, I don't know, where have you seen kind of this battle happening? People aware of it?
Well, I think by necessity, people are going to figure it out. Like, you can't be a Gen Z doomer for your entire life. At a certain point, you're
What does that even mean, Gen Z?
Gen Z doomer, well, someone from the Z generation who's kind of given up on life and takes the black pill, doesn't strive upwards, that sort of thing, because that is not iterable. At a certain point, you will run out of your false sense of philosophical superiority there too. Like, you can only be a nihilist for so long before you realize, oh wait, this kind of sucks.
Yeah, going nowhere fast.
Yeah.
Right. So what would we propose to them? What's kind of a classical, and maybe not even like strictly speaking Christian. Obviously, as Christians, we would see that we would have something to say about this. But where would people of more of like a class of integrated philosophy, maybe a Christian tradition, say, hey, this is why your life is hollow, this is what you should do?
It's tricky because whenever you go towards one of these false goods, you're half right in whatever you're doing. But you need to be religious, and since the right religion is Christianity, I'd have to say Christianity is just the answer to that, because Christianity gathers all those goods into the highest good, and only through that can you have a fulfilling life.
Yeah, I love that point, because this is actually a big point of St. Thomas Aquinas. He says, he pounds this home to the end of the day, that even people who are bad moral actors, people who are bad people, are making bad choices, choosing bad things, even very average people, just the average Joe off the street, who might have in his life the ultimate priority of either money, power, pleasure, I forgot it again. Money, power, pleasure. Whatever
Anyway.
the other one is.
One of those four things.
One of those four things that in choosing it, he's intending a real good. The pursuit is of a real valuable good. In other words, there is a pursuit of meaning, but it's not that great good.
Yes.
That summum bonum, in the good old, some Latin there for you, right? That ultimate good. So I would agree that even if we could talk about Christianity as the right religion and things like that, but even without apologetics, if we just look at the arrangement of how to live a good life, how to live a life of meaning and of purpose, and we look at the moral system of Christianity, you arrive at this remarkable organization that just has simply God, who is that one great good at the center, around which all sorts of instrumental goods exist. But with him at the center, only then do these instrumental goods actually do the good that they're supposed to do, right? Only then are they an actual help at arriving at that end. So, for example, somebody who has the good of honor or sort of some kind of influence or social prestige. Today, there's a crisis of self-obsession where people are just, it's kind of weird, honestly, just obsessed with celebrities and movie actors, and just like,
or having a lifestyle akin to theirs, or akin to what you think is theirs.
Right.
Even they don't live totally glamorous lifestyles.
So there's what is that person doing? They're seeking influence based on this influencer. So this person might have a good of a sense of influence or honor, if you will. The Christian view is that's a good thing. Have a sense of honor and dignity and even upright standing and things like that, but see that as only a tool in the ultimate toolbox of helping people arrive at that great good. You have something good to offer, something admirable, one of those 4 pillars, if you will, good. Allow that to be a tool in the toolbox, an instrument in the plan of God to bring people to ultimate truth, which is God, which is what he's revealed to us, what has come down to us in the creeds, what Jesus of Nazareth has put forth. So, yeah, that maybe starts to get at that a little bit.
Yeah, so we have the solution. The trouble is just integrating it, right? Because the problem of getting all these 4 goods to align is that it's almost like 4 different responsibilities, right? You need to kind of put your nose to the grindstone, have a good career, which a lot of people are like willing to suffer through, but by sacrificing other things. So you need to sacrifice a little bit of that to have time for your family. You need to sacrifice a little bit of those 2 to have artistic pursuits, let's say, or whatever. So for every one of these goods we have, there's certain other sacrifices and balances we have to make, which is what I suffer through a lot, trying to balance like hanging out with people and actually interacting with humans and then writing books and stuff. That's
right.
Always a, if you can't tell.
A delicate balance.
Yeah, it's trouble for me. But yeah, and I think
you're in danger of going off and becoming a hermit.
I've considered it. It's just very, very, very appealing. But I don't know, I'll jump on Discord with the boys every once in a while. Yeah. But then for like the next month or so, just shut off my computer. No, it's not that bad yet. So I think one big thing that can really get people to shoulder this suffering is the image of Christ crucified, right? And this is one thing I think Protestantism really lacks, is that we'll just take how these different denominations show the cross, right? The Protestant cross is usually just a plain cross because Christ is not on it. He has already risen. He's victorious. But the Catholic image of it is Christ still on the cross. And I obviously prefer the Catholic version because you're seeing Christ crucified there. The model way of being is not just the victory itself, but it's an enduring that suffering. That is so important. And sometimes when I'm looking at the cross, I get that same stirring that you get when you're reading a great book with a really compelling hero. It's like, I want to be that. It's scary, obviously, like the worst way to die ever, but you have to be willing to take that on first. Because I think that's where Protestantism and cultural Christianity fails, is that it offers a good, happy ending, and then you're left wondering why everything right now seems so wrong. And I'm not to say that that's how all Protestants think and stuff. It's just I don't think that view as a whole properly addresses it.
I think I know what you mean. An example might be, and not all Protestants would hold this, but if we can like be almost unfair and just simplifying it.
Sorry.
The once saved, always saved. Like people come to this moment of being born again, and whatever legitimate like moments of grace that God is breaking through, and we'd say like great if He is. But formulating that into kind of a belief system of, well, I have been saved. It's over. Yeah, but Jesus won.
That's not how your life plays out. Was that one moment where you went to the local baptismal really like the pivotal moment? I mean, maybe, but I'd argue that like every moment of your life could be that moment if you're willing to bear that responsibility, you know. It might not feel like that until you properly attend to it. But like when you're walking down the street and you meet someone, how you interact with them could totally change their day. Now imagine how many different little interactions like that you have in any given day. Now, I'm not talking about like genuine, even talking to people or like helping them out when you can see they're depressed. I'm saying like just how you're treating every little thing, that kind of holds sway as far as to who you are and how that plays exactly into salvation. I have no idea. I'm not a theologian, but I think that's a very helpful way to think about it, at least for me.
It at least makes sense of suffering and just messiness in our own life. And it's not that Jesus doesn't save us, and give us every grace to be saved at any given moment. It's not really about that. It's about, well, okay, what about today? If I'm going through a particular struggle and there's some family tension or something like that, like how do I address that? If I put on the sort of the Christian theological hat of, well, Jesus has already won, I just need to rejoice and be okay with it. We would even say like, yeah, that's true, but like, I don't feel that that doesn't meet me in my own, the grist of my own suffering necessarily. So I think it's a good point in terms of an image of Jesus crucified, reminds us that he's not only on the cross for us in that moment, but we see ourselves on the cross with him. That our suffering now has an ultimate meaning, that it's been recapitulated. Our own lives and various dusty trails that we take throughout the course of our lives is ultimately recapitulated under him, recapped, in other words, right? So Christ at the head, capitis, baseball cap. Recapitulated is just, it's realigned under his headship. My suffering and my existential crises and financial stresses or whatever it might be, not just my own sufferings now. It has particular and proximate significance in the fact that in that moment that's outside of time, Jesus died for me. Jesus suffered so that my suffering wouldn't lead to death and damnation, but that as he's gone before me, would lead to resurrection, to healing, to regeneration, things like that, right? So, which is a little bit weird because, I don't know, Bishop Barron says this, and I think he says it just right when he's talking about the cross. Like, I don't even know if we have one behind us here, but I guess over there, kind of behind you, there's an image. But in the time of Jesus, people didn't really see the cross in the purely religious symbol that we see it now. We're like, oh, there's a cross, there's a crucifix, oh, you must be Christian. We've lost a sense of the awful and terrible shock and brutality of the cross, such that the early Christians, it's not until several centuries after Jesus that we began to find evidence that people were like, you might know this, right? But the early sign of I'm a Christian was not a cross, it was a fish. Just
because the cross was almost just inappropriate in how grotesque it was.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just like a death. Like when you see, even like a crucifix, when you see it, looks like a guy's kind of falling asleep, just hanging there. And it was, you were stripped naked in front of everyone. You were like bloody, beaten, and it wasn't a clean death either. You were struggling to breathe for hours on end.
It's too horrible to really even think about or want to think about. But why? God in Jesus goes down to the depths of God-forsakenness, and there's no God-forsaken moment that we can possibly experience that is unredeemed. It's been all bought back by him. It's just all about recapitulating it in our own lives, bringing it back to him of, gosh, Jesus, I know you redeemed me in my addiction to XYZ, but I actually got to give it over to you again and again and again. And the image of the cross is helpful for that. We just covered a lot of ground there.
Yes.
But, yeah, what forms of, like, there's bad forms of sharing the faith and sharing meaning, and there's good forms of it. Going out with a megaphone on the corner of a campus.
I've heard so many testimonials of people hearing, oh yeah, that guy screaming at me that I'm going to hell. That really changed my heart. No, it's no. It's you have to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves, and there's nothing gentle about a megaphone or a sign on a college campus. It's a pretty poor way of doing that, because you have no true connection with those people other than leading with the hard pill to swallow. So you can't blame them for walking away. And
that's right, because that's good old-fashioned guilt-driven proselytization. Yes. You're basically trying to, that sounds like a horrible option. What's the second best option? Or the best option? Heaven, as it turns out. So, but there's no. How does that speak to somebody who's not aware of why there's a crisis in their life?
It's heaven and hell are like very real, but that's the end state of the Christian life, not necessarily the hands-on experience right now. Although I'd go so far to say as in the sinful life, you can see hell start to manifest, because when you have problems that you allow yourself to fall into resentment about, which then lead to more problems, that's akin to a bottomless pit. But when you're arguing with secular types, you really need to not lead with hell, because at any moment they can just tap out, I'm just going to choose not to believe in that, and now any sort of hell guilt.
Or even heaven. Like, hey, do you want to go to heaven?
Who's to say that's real? I don't care. So I think the best way to reach secular people, or even modern people with a religious background, because it's hard to bring heaven and hell up, is that you talk about the practical utility of Christianity. Now, Christianity is not utilitarian, because when I say utilitarian, you think of societies set up aimed at a good that is not the highest good, right? And that's why they inevitably fall down. Christianity aims at the highest good, and that's why it can work. It's pragmatic in the grandest scope possible, and that's what makes it actually real.
That's a keen point, I think, because a lot of people, for whatever reason, their experience of Christianity or faith-filled people is like, that's kind of for the geeks. Like, I get that faith has some real significance for some people and stuff, but like not really for me. I'm not really a religious person. But we would say, you were just saying that, no, this is actually the most logical, rational, normal, practical choice you could make, is to be a Christian.
But it can't be restricted to rationality, because I think rationality is one of those things that can be twisted by your temperament or bend, or just your a priori assumptions about how you approach things. Because like people who are depressed and they go to talk to their therapist, they can have some pretty watertight arguments about why they shouldn't go on living, right? And obviously they're wrong. But faith is more about which direction are you aiming, I think is a better way to think about it. And that aim has to be very precise, because like sin means you're missing the mark. You didn't aim properly enough.
Yeah.
That's a better way of coming up with it.
Right. So how do we have helpful conversations with young people who have a crisis of meaning and aren't really ready to hear about religion, heaven, hell, Jesus, things like that? What kind of conversation can we have with them to start the conversation?
Well,
how do we connect meanings?
Usually you're in a casual setting where things are kind of small scale, small stakes, so just start there. Like if you're at work and someone has a resentful attitude, can't stop complaining, say, hey, like you every time you complain, that's like a little prayer that's aiming you further downward. Instead, think about it a different way, like try to help people, because hopefully you'll get them to turn their aim and they'll start to see their environment brighten around them when they do that.
Yeah. So much of human experience is just shared, right? So when we talk about a crisis of meaning, like everybody's always had a crisis of meaning to some degree. You can't not, otherwise.
It's a fundamental crisis.
It's the fundamental crisis of what meaning does my life ultimately have. It turns out that just showing up to the same job and even being married to a wonderful person, having family, there is real and inherent meaning in that. But, the job could change, we could get fired, eventually we'll die. Our family members will die. So is it just that? One thing that I've noticed in this conversation to be able to chat with young people about is why they even want to be happy. Like, who says that happiness is even something we should think about or want?
True, you could be hooked up to a machine that just constantly feeds you drugs to get the dopamine kicks. Is that really enlightenment?
Right. And nobody thinks that it is. Ultimately, people are stuck in the cycle of it. But it's largely predicated because they have never been happy. They've never actually had the freedom of virtue to be able to choose something meaningful in their life, a way to live, a community that is truly woven into the fabric of their lives. And so it's this constant cycle of self-invention, right? Where we don't receive meaning from a creator, for example. We have to wake up and reinvent ourselves. This ultimate ethereal freedom to be whatever you want, whoever you want, with whomever you want. Ultimately doesn't lead to freedom. Make your own golden calf, YOLO. Quite shockingly, maybe for some people, doesn't lead to happiness and the results that we'd hope freedom would bring us. St. John Paul II, one of my intellectual and theological heroes, he famously said, right, freedom doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want. It's not a free license to do whatever we want. Which is, I think if you ask most people today, hey, what's freedom? It gives me the capacity to just choose what I want. But he continues, right? Freedom is not the license to do whatever you want. It's the freedom or the ability to do what you should.
It's
to do what you ought.
The quote from Exodus isn't Pharaoh, let my people go, is Pharaoh, let my people go so that we may worship the Lord. That's true freedom.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, right in the book of Exodus, that was not the first plan of God. A lot of people probably don't think about this. It wasn't like, hey, we're just going to get them out. It's done. You guys are enslaved. It's very, very terrible. And it was. But God's priority there was, let my people go so they can worship for 3 days. And even to that, Pharaoh says no. So there's a priority of spiritual freedom over material freedom and flourishing, if you will. So, yeah, I mean, to recap that, being able to recognize the grappling that every human being has with, I want to be happy, and why? Do I have a right to be happy? What sort of tools or instruments, if you will, in my life have I been using to try to make myself happy, and have I arrived?
Sometimes when you're sad, it feels more right than if it would be to be happy. Like if a dog dies or a friend dies, hopefully not, or something. It obviously doesn't feel good, but it feels proper. It's kind of like in a song, kind of the, not discord, but minor chord before the final proper chord. Because life would be really boring if you were just content and happy all the time, or simply thrilled all the time. It'd be wrong.
Yeah, it's plastic again, I guess. And what I mean by happiness is not that we have a sense of fun or entertainment or sort of shallow contentment with our own life. That can lead to a form of self-obsession and fakeness. Because I think you're right that like sometimes people, we hear a song and it might be a heartbreak song and we just kind of get into it. Because we're like, no, this is maybe like sappy and sad, but there's something that I really relate to. This is articulating something deep within my soul of my fundamental unhappiness and sadness and loneliness, that this song, maybe because it's about a breakup or whatever, is giving words to something deeper in me. Like, I'm happily married to sweet Miss Rachel now for going on 8 years. Been really blessed with our kiddos and things like that. Couldn't imagine marrying a better woman. But for some reason, like those breakup songs, like if I listen to it, it's like there's still something true about this. Not in my relationship with Rachel, but in my relationship with myself, in my relationship with God, my Creator. That there's like this disorientation that's there, and only when, again, that's oriented towards happiness now has a name. It's not something that I do. It's not something that I achieve. Happiness is a relationship with a person, and his name is Jesus. That ultimate happiness rests in God who is love, God who extends that gift of divine life, without which our souls are just stuck with the camouflage, or instead of the gold of divine life, we're just stuck on the glitter of like the next thing.
The fleeting glitter that is doomed to pass.
It's doomed to pass, right?
I should be an author or something. That was good.
That was really good. Yeah, right. Well, you're all dressed in black, talking very melancholically about the good of feeling sad. So
we won't talk about how little dress clothes I have in my closet. So it's not a flannel today.
Right. Well, if you button that up and throw a collar on there, you look shockingly clerical. So
true. I think our Christian values are so widespread that they've been taken for granted, and that's partially why it's hard to reach people. Because nowadays, when you try to evangelize, let's say, people will judge the moral character of God, but without some transcendent power, who's to say what is right, you know? And what they're really doing, for example, human dignity. The church, since some people sin, it tells people not to sin and tells you to veer away from this lifestyle. And so then certain people will take that and say, oh, people of this lifestyle aren't treated with enough dignity. That is wrong. Well, why is it wrong? That's by no means self-evident. I mean, if certain lifestyles tend to be less healthy, I'm kind of veering off the rails here. Sorry about that. Okay. But if certain lifestyles tend to be like less healthy or something, then just by nature of what they are, they're less right. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We're getting into muddy water because I'm trying to get outside a perception of there being any morality at all, which is not how reality is laid out. So it's hard to kind of even conceptualize that.
So you're saying like that's a common tendency or view of young people today, is that morality is ultimately subjective, mm-hmm. and you can kind of determine what's right and wrong as long as you're a nice person and it doesn't affect me.
They follow their gut, and they retreat into subjectivism whenever the conversation gets good, I think mm-hmm. is how I like to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I remember not so long ago, I was chatting with a person about, gosh, what was this about? I think it was about abortion, and you know, they had sometimes popular, I guess with a decent amount of contingent of people is popular of, yeah, I believe abortion is wrong because I don't believe that you should end the life of, and by life, they were kind of air quoting it, mm-hmm. but like what I believe is a life inside of a mother's womb. So like, well, should it be illegal then? Well, not everybody agrees with me though. So
well, then why do you believe that yourself? It's if some people don't agree with you, then why? And you effectively back away from your own beliefs when they speak up about it. You don't believe that.
Right. This is the paradox of relativism, yes. Right? Where morality or truth is relative person to person. It's like, this is how I feel about abortion, but it doesn't really. Well, then we got to figure this out because we're dealing with a real case here. This isn't like a mm-hmm. hypothetical. The taking of a life, an unborn, a preborn human, is not the value of that life doesn't change depending upon how I feel about it mm-hmm. or somebody else's opinion. Like we have to drill down to what is a kind of moral standard. Like what do we start with in terms of truth to be able to build on? So fine, you may not believe that abortion is morally wrong all the time. Well, what do you believe is wrong all the time? Mm-hmm. Anything? I worked at the YMCA, this is many years ago, in the kitchen when I was finishing up college. Yeah, I was the kitchen dude. And one of the ladies that I work with, a nice lady by the name of Bree, we were talking about truth, and she was pretty firmly of the belief that there is no like real fundamental truth. And I said, okay, so is it always wrong to murder is it always wrong for a grown person to, I'm trying to think of an extreme example here where she's like, oh yeah, I guess never mind. But is it always wrong for a grown human person to intentionally murder an innocent toddler? And she's like, well, in culture today, that would be viewed as wrong.
I kind of like culture today because we don't murder innocent toddlers, but that's just me. That's my subjective
Maybe
opinion.
that time will pass, Franklin.
Yeah.
Maybe a time will come in
Yeah.
10 years when it'll be totally okay to murder innocent toddlers.
That view will make me an outdated bigot.
Well, it was interesting though, because that was her like legitimate thought, is that morality just kind of evolves with culture. People kind of say things and like,
If
hey,
it
by the way, it's kind of in the
evolves.
water. Like, hey, I don't know if you guys know it's wrong to murder toddlers. But her view is, well, that's just because most people think that today. But there's no ultimate standard of truth that's built on. It's just that in 2025 today, that people think that's wrong. And that might change in 10 years or 1,000 years.
If it evolves, like what makes it true, and why is that true now, other than it's just socially regulated that you have to think murdering toddlers is bad? I think that's not a philosophical angle she was coming from. I think she was kind of leaning on the culture, which has worked for like the vast majority of human existence. Because back then, the bar for acting morally was high for the most part.
In Christian culture, Western culture, and certainly in some Eastern cultures as well.
Mm-hmm.
But right, there was.
Well, just like survival back in caveman days, like if you fornicated too much, there'd be a lot of hungry mouths to feed and not food to go around. Like practically speaking, that's like morality is practical. And that's what makes it true. It's like the most practical thing.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you steal from other societies, they won't trust you, and without the help of other tribes, you'll probably starve when tough times come. It's very deep, even deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. But then that might be part of her point is, see, it's just part of a social code. So these tribes needed each other. It was basically to a kind of social advantage that kind of morality of, hey, don't steal, evolved, because if we steal, then it's going to come back to bite us. So, but when there's no tribes, when there's economic progress and stuff, then she's like, see, stealing doesn't really matter that much, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody.
All this economic progress in science and, for the most part, betterment of society started with, for the most part, the Catholic Church, right? Because the Catholic Church is responsible for a whole lot of science. All the philosophical assumptions of science are based on, okay, there's an ordered universe. Human rights is based in Christian thought because human beings are created in the image of God. That's important. That's what ended slavery, is human beings, no matter who they are, even if they are wretched people, since they are human, they have dignity. That's based in Christianity too. Any feminist argument is imperfectly based in Christianity because God made man and woman. Mm-hmm. That's from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it seems is without a foundation that brings all humans to a point of equality and the sense of identity, that we're all created by God, equal in dignity, equally loved by Him. Without that kind of foundation, human nature and its value is kind of up for grabs. Like, it is a little bit survival of the fittest type vibes. Not even, certainly between the genders, where there's competition, where a man can't be at home and just being a man and home in himself is what I mean, to be confident in that. And similarly with women, with like feminist movements that you spoke about that really stem out of the 60s, where the preach thing is, hey, you can liberate yourself from this horrible system where man's been keeping you down. Now, could we talk about, in any culture at any time, some kind of injustice between the sexes? I absolutely think so. In history, are there clear signs of just, the reality of slavery, for example, based on race? Or that women not being allowed to read or something like that? Sure. But that's not what Christianity proposes.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that Christianity had to deal with. And part of that dealing was not actually, as it turns out, powerful pagan dude, your wife has every bit as much dignity, even if she might have a different exercise or role in society. She has every bit as much dignity as you and free choice. So to be able to pursue that, if she pursue education if she wants. Slightly rabbit hole-ish there, but bringing it back to like
Fun is in the rabbit holes, by the way.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But bringing it back to today in terms of how can we make truth claims and like build a life of concrete meaning. To my friend Bree, who I mentioned before, it would have been impossible to do in the way that we're talking about, because there is no absolute meaning.
Mm-hmm.
God is this bearded idea of a guy we made up in the sky to kind of fill in the gaps of our own unhappiness. Morality is conditioned by different leaders in society. So my own meaning and purpose is whatever I invent it to be. I think that's like, we don't have to argue about religion to be able to say, gosh, the results are in. The results are in. People are very unhappy and just in disarray, not just culturally as a whole, but how that seeps into even family life. If what is marriage? Well, marriage is more or less whatever you need it to be. Not even like with who you need it to be or when, but just the covenant of marriage being reduced to a contract. Or a very growing thing today is prenuptials.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where you're like, hey, by the way, if or when we get a divorce, you get the dogs, I get the cats. And baked into marriage is now basically a really easy, uncomplicated way to get out of it.
Which it's supposed to be a sort of conviction.
Mm-hmm. That's the thought.
Can't think of the word right now. No, but it's like you're supposed to be bound together. And
Covenant?
if you are yes, covenant.
There it is.
It's supposed to be a covenant. But
till death do us part type vibes.
Yes, but that's why we say that. But until bad argument do us part, that just seems gross.
Right. And people know it. It's just, I don't know. I think people, on the one hand, people are confused about it. On the other hand, they're not like hearing the truth, if you will. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think somebody could, and they just like I don't want to change. Like, I don't want to live a life that's not about me. Living a life of the ego drama is a lot more in my control, because my life's about me. I'm the main actor. I'm starring in it, if you will.
Well, you are the protagonist in a hero's journey. You have to go down into the depths and be put on the cross, so to speak. But the true hero does that in humility. It's not about like being the star. It's about being the dirty, scuffed up hero. Mm-hmm. I think that's a better way to see it. Because stories are really powerful, and having main character energy is a bad thing. But I think when people say main character energy, they're thinking the like Hollywood actor on the movie poster, not necessarily like Frodo and Sam covered in ash climbing up Mount Doom.
Right.
How many Lord of the Rings references has this been? At least two.
I don't know. I think they're all coming from you. I'm a big Lord of the Rings guy myself, but I'm just...
I hit my quota for today, so...
Yeah, right.
Do you have time for one more rabbit hole?
Sure.
So, obviously, a big thing about modern people is that they're very scientifically minded, so to speak, right? This is starting to wane now, but when I was growing up through high school, the big argument was like Christianity versus atheism and stuff. And atheism, as far as I can tell, is kind of like the death throes of Enlightenment thinking. When you make rationality like the highest good, you tend to rationalize away God, because your a priori assumptions about things are, I think, therefore I am. That's not your line, that's God's line, by the way. But you're thinking out from yourself, so you aren't willing to receive the the idea that there's the higher good that could be informing what's going on. But anyway, that's why atheism is kind of that end stage of the Enlightenment, and at least scientifically, why that's wrong is because the scientific worldview is the human experience, or how do I want to phrase this? It's way more fallible than the basic human experience, right? Because sure, you are human, you have only so much you can perceive, but any sort of scientific viewpoint you have is subject to your human experience. When a scientist looks at a set of data, they're only looking for what they, as a human, want to look for. It's still subjective, even though it's objective. And who's to define what their scientific perspective is? Because a subjective person could not set an objective viewpoint, because that is just simply arbitrary. It's of a grander scale, if that makes sense. And the problem is that those people are called experts, and they're the final arbiters of truth, but they're the people that set up the conditions for truth, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I think it doesn't make sense, right? What you're saying makes sense, but however solid an expertise they might be in whatever field they're an expert in, that doesn't make them an expert in philosophy or meaning or invisible spiritual matters. So I think you're probably right, and it's an interesting question of if atheism. I think I could be wrong on this, but it seems like the sort of the atheistic rallying cry of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I just don't see that as much of that.
They're realizing days. It's empty and hollow because they've had time to live it out.
So then what's next? Is there like a vacuum then of thoughts? Like, it's probably not that, okay, well, I guess atheism's kind of empty. I guess maybe I want to learn about God and Jesus. It's probably not the next natural step for people.
There's two things as far as I can tell. Granted, I'm a layman. I've barely been alive for like a quarter of a century. I barely know what's going on. But as far as I can tell, there's a vague spiritualism based on scientific stuff. People go to science to try to find consciousness and stuff, but there's very little evidence as far as I can tell about any of that. And then there's the maybe Christian literalist, although I think a better way to say that is a scientifically minded Christian who goes into the scriptures looking to extract a deeper scientific meaning and not realizing that scripture itself is the bottom. That's where meaning is coming from. So like atheists like mock people who take the book of Genesis literally, and I mean for good reason. The book of Genesis, even if you're not a modern person, there's logical problems, right? There's morning and night before the sun is even made. Well, how does that work? It doesn't take a modern Neil deGrasse Tyson to point that out. Someone who lived back in the olden times would have seen that. And it's, to answer that question quickly, the point of Genesis is talking about how reality plays itself out or is constructed, and not the scientific mechanisms behind it. It's there's the tohu va bohu. Did I get that right?
I don't know.
Maybe tohu va bohu. Yes, that's the primordial chaos, the dark waters of the deep. You haven't heard that one?
No. Is that Hebrew?
I think so.
Okay.
Hopefully. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Did you learn that from Jordan Peterson?
Nope, that was Bishop Barron.
Okay, all right.
He, I think both probably talked about it at this point. But the dark, deep water, which is, think like material reality, and then coming from above is informing meaning or Platonic forms or purpose that comes to reality. That's how reality plays itself out. The scientific mechanisms that brought Earth into existence don't necessarily matter, because that's kind of arbitrary. Like, who cares if the sun goes around the Earth or the Earth goes around the sun, unless you're flying a rocket? Your experience now is the same, and how you see meaning in things is far more important, if that makes sense.
like one could care about whether or not the Earth orbits the sun or the sun orbits the Earth, but that doesn't make me happy or sad one way or the other. Like it doesn't provide me with a moral code, a way to live,
Yes.
a sense of purpose and meaning. Right? That's kind of what you're getting at. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, just kind of coming back again to every choice that we make for some kind of a reason. It's impossible to make a decision about whether or not I'm going to have chips or a cookie right now, about whether I want to move across the country, about what kind of job I want, about whether or not I'm going to read or study, about whether or not I'm just going to lay in bed all day. All those choices are based on what I think I want, what's going to make me most happy.
What you're aiming at, as in like what you want and what you're looking for, actually determines how you perceive the world itself, if that makes any sense. There's John Vervaeke, very smart neuropsychologist, has this idea of relevance realization, and I'm going to butcher this.
Relevance realization.
Well,
I don't know what that means.
It's in short, for our purposes here, it's that there's an infinite number of little facts and stimuli in the world, right? Take this chair I'm sitting in, for example. It's made up of a bunch of little squares. There's a bunch of little strings making these squares, and a bunch of atoms making up the strings. And that's just the cushion of the chair, but we'll leave it at that. Is that like the bottom of the reality? Is that what makes this a chair? Or does what makes this a chair the idea that I can sit and be comfortable in it? And obviously, strings don't matter. If this was made out of plastic, I'd be sitting in it the same way. Maybe less comfortably, but it's still a chair. And so the purpose of things, or how you the purpose that you're trying to find in things, determines how you see the world, rather than just whatever arbitrary scientific level of analysis you want to make of it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Did you have a quote from him in that document that you sent over?
He had a definition of relevance realization. I'll read it quick.
Yeah, why don't you? Because I was reading, I thought that's pretty sharp.
So, this is John Vervaeke speaking. Relevance realization is the name I give to a process which I argue is central to general intelligence. Your general intelligence is your capacity to solve a wide variety of problems in a wide variety of domains. For most of the problems you face, the interrelated task of selecting what you are to pay attention to, what you're going to remember, and what you're going to do. The problem facing attention is that the amount of information available to you is astronomically vast. You have to ignore most of it, which is a lot of information. You cannot just arbitrarily guess what you should attend to, nor can you methodically check all the information for that you will take more time than your lifetime. There is a similar problem facing memory. Your long-term memory stores a vast amount of knowledge, and the number of ways that information can be combined is astronomically vast. Similarly, all the possible sequences of actions which you could undertake is astronomically vast. Yet, moment by moment, you are neither guessing nor methodically checking all the information, all your memory, or all the options for action. You are honing in on the relevant information while remembering information relevant to your situation and selecting a relevant course of action. So that's the gist of it. And that's why in Christianity and in other religions as well, it's about what you worship. What is the most deeply relevant thing in your life?
Right. So that kind of like thought experiment there. What significance do you think that has, or insight do you think that brings to now, and life's always busy, it's not like life's just busy in 2025 and it hasn't, but where there's an inundation of information, where we live in an information age, like Google, Gemini, AI, facts, social media, everything is just information everywhere. Like, what does it mean for us to be able to identify, like, what's relevant to me and my happiness and what's not? Like, how do we sort through that? Because it seems like people have trouble doing that. Like, I just like kind of do what I feel like doing. And what I feel like doing next is what's relevant. If I feel like sitting here and eating a cheeseburger and scrolling on my phone, I might do that for 2 hours. But is that really relevant? What does it mean?
Those are those things that capture your attention are those lesser goods we talked about that aren't properly integrated in the highest good, like eating another Big Mac, one more Big Mac than you should. Well, it's important to have a full belly and, like, you know, eat so that you stay alive, but it's not worth the extra calories and who knows what else in that burger. If that makes sense.
Make America healthy again, huh? That's what I'm hearing.
Eat red meat.
Eat red meat, right on. Good. Well, maybe like a practical. What's one way that we can more practically today be able to sort through our life and be like, this is what's ultimately relevant or important in my life, and this is maybe a distraction from that ultimate good. Like, what in our life are goods that are instrumental goods, maybe that are helpful, like that's pleasurable, like a delicious cheeseburger, or watching a movie, or things maybe related to wealth or influence or control. What's a practical way that we can see those, like be able to identify those in our lives and situate them around the one true central good from which all goods flow, namely God?
Pray. And I genuinely mean that. That's not like the standard. Well, it's the standard Christian answer for a reason, right? Because what do you do when you pray? Well, even if you're in a loud environment, you at least silence your thoughts for a little bit. You kind of remove all the things calling your attention from your attention, and you step back and go, okay, what am I trying to do here? What's the proper way forward? And what are the things I'm doing that aren't properly aligned with that path? Mm-hmm. So even if you're not a religious person, you can take that advice and implement it, and I think it'll help a lot. Mm-hmm. It's what I do. And if I wasn't doing it, it wouldn't be proper advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is interesting too, right? When the Christian says pray, we do mean in a real way meditate, but we use that word differently than maybe like burgeoning yoga groups, or like, why don't you just meditate a little bit and find the center. I find your inner peace.
Maybe not find your inner peace, but find the essence of being and align yourself with that.
You're playing the Christian side of that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So that's what prayer is. Prayer is not just a mental exercise, me by myself trying to make sense of the world. It's a conviction that within myself, within my person, and the reason for my existence is an eternal person, is an eternal good, that summum bonum again. So I'd agree with you that prayer, learning how to pray, and it takes time and effort and energy, but to realign, like that's what brings clarity to all the things in our life, distractions which lead to self-absorption and ultimately unhappiness, broken relationships, and so forth. It just doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be that way. God doesn't intend it to be that way. If He's at the center, we don't lose all those things. We actually finally receive them freely instead of just clinging to them like to pearls that we're afraid that we're going to lose. So,
practical advice about prayer too is that I'm not saying, although this is a great idea, like find 15 minutes a day to pray, but it's like even like as much as you possibly can throughout the day, try to shut out the things trying to grab at your attention. Remind yourself what you're aiming at, what you're doing wrong, and what you can do to go forward. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good hands-on way to do it. It's a difficult habit to build up, but it's not difficult to start either. Mm-hmm. It's like once people turn off this YouTube video and go to do whatever they're going to do, they can try it. Just what am I aiming at?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, make it practical. What I sometimes do, I mean, you could do this in 5 minutes if you wanted to pray right now after this is done. Or right now. Just turn it off because prayer is more important.
Pause the video. It's YouTube.
That's right. Right, place yourself in the presence of God. Be able to acknowledge just what's going on in your mind and your heart, what's weighing on you, what do you feel anxious or excited about. The big next move is then actually relating that to God. Like, so prayer is not just like entering into your own mental neighborhood just for a walk around and then out we go. Prayer is being able to observe what's going on here, acknowledge that, and then step number 2, relate that to God. Be like, Jesus, I feel this way about this. I would like this. I would like for you to do this for me.
And if you do it right, it doesn't even take 5 minutes or 1 minute.
Right.
If you get into the habit, it can be
just natural.
Instantaneous.
But in terms of the second part of prayer, because that's more what we can control in prayer. That's the meditation. But contemplation is really where peace is found. This is really where our soul starts to encounter the transcendent love of God. When prayer becomes something that we don't control and litigate the whole time, but where we allow God to take command. So we prepare ourselves by being able to acknowledge and relate ourselves to God so that we're opening the door. But the heart of prayer is when Jesus actually comes in, when God can actually shine his light. So this is where we receive, for example. And maybe that reception might come through sitting with a scripture passage or something. But then there's the practical respond. God, what are you calling me to do? Is there a rearrangement in my life that I need to make so that I can actually have a life with you at the center? So acknowledge, relate, then take time to be able to receive, rest in the loving gaze of God, and respond in a little or maybe big way where he's calling us to. There's prayer 101, I suppose. Not on our list of things to talk about,
nope.
But good things nevertheless.
Yeah.
You got to get a haircut, man. Mr. Franklin. I'm just kidding. Hey, thanks for your time today.
No problem.
And to you hardcore people out there who hung around, thanks for joining for Missionary Moments. Go have some missionary moments of your own. There you go. A long, slow gaze at the camera. I see you.